Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Outdoor Hospitality Weekly. I'm Alex Burkett, joined as always by Matt Whittemore. And Matt, man, what a rainy day it is here. I hope in the post-production of this, I can cut out all this rain, but spring showers are here. It's officially April as we're recording this. I know camping season is around the corner for many. We're going to talk a lot about a little bit of demand drivers and how some of these different events and different things kind of connect to your campground operation and what that demand looks like. I think that's probably been one of the most asked questions that I've heard from people. I know as you've had conversations with people, everybody's, I think a little bit, on edge of sorts of like, how is this season going to shake out? What is demand really looking like? Particularly, as we talked last week with RV sales and gas prices, that's kind of the negative side. I think we're going to try and touch on some of the more positive indicators of demand and some of the things that the largest companies and developers in the space are doing to try and combat that. But before we dive in, how's things going with you?
Pretty good. Busy, deep in the wormhole of AI agents and OpenClaw. So that's been a lot of fun. Not getting much sleep and just trying to figure these things out. It's the power is incredible and a little bit scary, and learning a lot about software engineering, I guess, in a kind of light way, but also just like project management and staying detail oriented. I would not say I'm a details guy, but you have to be with these types of things. So just building and iterating and figuring out how to properly document everything. And the hardest part is getting the mental model right. You're trying to automate these workflows, and a lot of times you're not even sure if your human workflow is right. And then you go to try and put an AI agent on it, and it forces you to really first examine your human workflow first. So a lot of building and iterating and screwing things up, and then going back to the drawing board and actually like asking myself, what am I actually trying to do here? And then going back at it. But it's been a lot of fun, learning a ton. It's been great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we'll definitely get a chance, hopefully at the end of this episode, to touch a little bit more on that in our tech corner, sharing a little bit more practical tips on AI, automation, and just what we're up to in the world of tech. But before we get there, we've got to dive into the news here this week. And Matt, we're going to kick things off with a little bit of event focus. So, to start with our lead story this week, obviously the World Cup is a huge event that's on everybody's mind season as we head into this summer. Obviously, even if your RV park, campground, outdoor hospitality business isn't near one of these locations, there's a lot of indications that are pointing to this being a really big demand driver, and where people are going to come out, similar to large tailgate events in college towns for college football and things like that, that this is going to be the type of event that people go outside, go camping for, and want to hang out with friends. But there was a developer who was actually trying to take advantage of the closeness and proximity of this event happening, Matt, in your neck of the woods in Massachusetts. I think, close to Foxborough. Most people who know knows you're a big Pats fan, and
Yeah.
the Patriots and Gillette is one of the host sites this year for the World Cup. So it was announced last week that Jared Hatch, who owns about 20 acres of land right around Route 1, so real close to the highway and the World Cup site of Gillette, put in an application to build an RV park that could host about 1,700 people for the games that were going to take place there. It'd be about 15 minutes from the stadium. And this was, again, a way that Jared thought, and I think smartly of him, right? Even if it was, we're going to put the infrastructure in, I'm going to upgrade the land, we're going to, use it for this event, it's still an upgrade to the land long after the event ends. And I think it's interesting to kind of focus around, a lot of times campgrounds, we have such a small window to generate demand and cash flow as it is, particularly if you're a seasonal park like ours in the Midwest or in the Northeast, like in Massachusetts. There is just this limited window of good weather that you have. But this, Matt, is like the extreme version of this. Like, we're going to make all of our money to try and recoup the development cost of doing this and try and just, pack the crap out of this land for what is really just a couple of weeks for the World Cup, all in all, and to try and really squeeze all that demand and all that cash flow, into that small of a window. Now, obviously, he wouldn't have had this isn't a year-round operating campground and this isn't an existing business, but I think this is an interesting take on development and how you're, like I said, really trying to match the demand to the supply. So Matt, what does this, tell you? And then I think you can give a little bit of update on where the project stands now today with some news that came out as well.
Yeah, I enjoyed reading about this one, and it's kind of a bummer that he ended up pulling his application just for the reason that he wasn't going to have enough time to get the permitting done, which is no surprise, really. It's Massachusetts is one of those places that's difficult to develop, like New York or California or, any of those kind of business environments that make it tough. It's a nice moat, right? When it's hard to develop, as opposed to like a Texas where or at least certain areas of Texas where it's easier to develop and you can run into supply issues. So double-edged sword there. Really interesting just thesis and conversation though. This had come up a while back on one of the Modern Campground MC fireside chats I was on months and months ago. So this has been a topic of conversation in the industry, as is really kind of any of these huge demand events that come up. And I think it just adds to the lens of a lot of people try to get into this industry and capitalize on the demand that sometimes it's not really justified. I think it's adjacent to another business that he has. It's land that this business owner already owned, and he was trying to capitalize, which, no knock on him. It sounded like it was a pretty well thought out, at least initial idea. He was going to put soccer fields in and have transportation, but it's 15 minutes from Gillette. I don't know much about the site in terms of what future kind of RV park it would be. It'd be kind of strange to have an RV park with the soccer field. I guess the soccer field isn't too much of a capital expenditure, can be turned into something else later on. But
well, and as you said, sporting events, youth tournaments, right? We've looked at baseball fields here at our property. I mean, that again,
right.
Another type of long-term demand driver. So it's always interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great area. 15 minutes from Gillette, not too far outside of Boston. I think there would be demand there, even if it was sort of more of an affordable transient housing type park. I just enjoyed. I'm from Massachusetts, so I enjoyed reading about these. Like one quote from one of the stories, the local news station guy quoting it says, "It's crowded now. You have trouble pulling out of Cumbies, the post office. It's only going to get worse. I don't think it's right." He's in opposition to the project, but just love the Cumberland Farms reference. People never know what that is. It's a gas station, convenience store. People always think it's like a farm, but fun little story. Bummer that he pulled the permit, but probably bit off more than he can chew, and quite an undertaking to build a campground or RV park in the state of Massachusetts. So no surprise there.
Yeah, and I think it shows, especially Matt, as you just mentioned, like the red tape that's involved with development, how long sometimes these things can take, right? He probably should have gotten started maybe a year ago, right? Especially in a not a business friendly state like Massachusetts or New York or something like that. So yeah, that is super interesting. And look, I think I touched on this in another episode as well, but our park here in Michigan has a little bit of a demand event that's coming this summer. So Billy Strings, the bluegrass artist, is doing a homecoming concert here at the end of August. And it is something that, again, if we were not an existing campground, and there are many people in the area who are now putting in temporary camping permits to the city of Ionia to try and meet the demand and just say, well, we're going to have boondocking, dry camping. I've got acreage, because a lot of people around here have farmland and extra space to try and, again, take advantage of. If I can get 5 people to come in, I'll put in a temporary camping permit, maybe rent a porta potty or something like that for people to use, no infrastructure costs like that, but, swell up for the 3 to 4 days that they're there. These people can make a lot of money and then, not have to do and go through this kind of process. So, and then with so much demand coming here, it is something that the city is actually looking at very seriously, looking at there are not enough existing hotel rooms and campgrounds like ours that can stomach that type of demand. It's estimated this is a small scale, could be between 30 and 40 people that are coming here for a bluegrass concert. Imagine what that's going to swell up in all of these different host cities around the country for, the World Cup. Great idea. Even you hear, okay, it's going to have 1,700 people would have been the proposed number of people. I mean, that is still minuscule compared to the amount of people that are going to be coming into Massachusetts, for the World Cup as it is. So I think demand planning around events, whether it's music, whether it's, I know KOA's also released information about Route 66 being, again, a huge demand driver this year. Anybody from Chicago, across the country down to, Arizona and, New Mexico, that whole stretch, I think that this is, I forget what anniversary or type of year that it is for Route 6. Or unfortunately, I have not, dug into that enough, but I know it's going to be a big year, that there's a lot of event programming and reason for people to take our, Route 66 type of road trip this year. I think events as demand drivers for campgrounds are only going to continue to become more popular. It's something that I think more people are going to try and take parcels of land or existing campgrounds can begin to just market to and take advantage of, regardless of where they are. Sticking on this point, Matt, we're going to switch gears and go to our next story here. And this is, we talked a little bit of experiential hospitality last week, covering Travis Chambers and Outpost X. We did a whole podcast episode on him, a few months ago, as well as touched on it last week. So if you need a primer on his story and his cool desert, Star Wars inspired, really incredible remote location with a lot of, it's kind of a retreat of sorts. If you're coming into this world, you're kind of being immersed in the experience at his property. This next story here from Terramor, which is KOA's glamping offshoot, they have their location in Maine. They're hosting what they are calling their Ember and Elements wellness retreat. Now, this is the second year that KOA has done this at Terramor, but a wide variety of things that they're doing for this event. Number one, they're bringing in different outside experts to help, guide people through different types of experiences. There's a yoga sculpting class, there's guided journaling and ETF tapping, gravel biking, hiking through Acadia, all kinds of different wellness experiences that they're offering, massage, right? And really taking that to the next level, where this is a high-end, glamping accommodations that Terramor has there. There's obviously an extra fee on top of this to participate in this type of retreat. But I think this, again, is a really unique idea to kind of pool that. We've seen Airbnb go experiential in their platform and trying to get people to combine the lodging in the experience. We're now seeing this really enter camping in a major way. I would bet, Matt, KOA and Terramor wouldn't have run this for a second year if it wouldn't have done well in year one. So I think, we hear and talk a lot about, there's stories that wellness is becoming more of a trend and something that people are seeking when they do outdoor hospitality. But this is a really great example of it in practice. And again, these type of retreats, I think, will only continue to pop up more.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this. And I think it's important for these stories to be discussed and to be put out there, because just some recent conversations I've had, even just with consumers, glamping consumers, right, comes up in conversation. I'm in the outdoor hospitality business, glamping and RV parks. And inevitably, it always comes up that, I tried glamping one time with my girlfriend, and it was just a safari tent out in the woods, and it was kind of janky, and
Didn't have air conditioning, and she was miserable. And
yeah, within 2 hours of being in there, we were wishing we were in a hotel room, and, it wasn't for us. And that's fine, right? It's definitely not for everybody. But I think there is kind of this perception with a lot of travelers, consumers, that, right, there's this hype around the industry, COVID, glamping, be outdoors. Like, there's definitely positive buzz and positive demand, but the bar is low. It's not really a professionalized industry. It's a lot of one-off Airbnb glamping sites, and that's a big chunk of the experience, right? And there a tie-in. There was recently an article that came out. It was glamping is entering its institutional era. And I thought it was an interesting, kind of juxtaposition of conversation I'd been having, and then you see these types of stories about the experiential side of it. And it's so important, right? We need to battle against that perception that operators are just capitalizing on demand and the buzz. They're throwing up a tent in a field and self check-in, and here you go, and here's some bug spray, and bring your own firewood and good luck, right? But it's nature, so enjoy. It's rejuvenating, and I think there's too much of that. That's what I always, anybody who will listen or anybody who's curious, I try to tell them that your differentiator is your programming, or all of the things that are not the infrastructure of the property or the tent or the furniture. That's obviously important, right? That's a one way to differentiate, but another way to differentiate that is a way to become supremely unique is your programming. There'll be similar programming, but if you really want to put the time in, you can have a totally unique program, events, partnerships with local businesses that nobody else can replicate. And then you have a business that's one of one. And I think it's important just to study these types of things and put them in a Pinterest board or a bulletin board, and they become your mind map for how do I make my business supremely unique that nobody else can replicate it. And that's a demand generator in and of itself. And I think a challenge for all of us in the industry is return guest profile. I think especially in glamping, especially with a lot of the popular brands out there, their work is cut out for them in that they have their Instagrammable architecture or unit type or interior, and young travelers, modern travelers go do that thing. They take their picture, they put it on Instagram, and there's zero reason to ever go back to that location. And I think we can counteract that by these recurring annual events, maybe do a few of them a year, right? Make it more like a club, make it more like a membership, right? I've seen these cool concepts of like outdoor clubs, mountain clubs, almost like a country club or a city club, but the outdoor hospitality version of that. And I think that's a really cool way to approach this business. It's a lot of work. It's hard. It's a lot of brain damage. It's a lot of human resources and financial resources, but that's why we do what we do, right? Is to offer special experiences, memorable experiences. And to me, that's such a huge lever to figure out how to get people to come back. And this is such a prime example with cool, like the offering menu that you ran through is like there's something for everybody in there, right? You want to recharge, you want to rest, you want to focus on the wellness side, or you want to get outside and get dirty and sweat and do the gravel bikes or hike. Like that's just, it seems like a very well thought out, well programmed event. So kudos to them.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this, Matt, that I'll touch on here briefly as we wrap this one up is Terramor has found good instructors that have a following already in that area. So there's demand support on that side as well, right? If you're somebody who regularly attends the yoga instructor's class outside of this type of retreat, you may go and piggyback on this type of event and say, well, I'm doing yoga regularly in my busy life. I know I'm going to like this element of the wellness retreat already. There's familiarity there. You're bringing a type of consumer who's interested in wellness into the glamping space, understanding that person, that might be an easy transition in somebody who's going to try that has never experienced a type of glamping accommodation before. So yeah, you're getting a really high level of service. There's demand support on both sides, instructors bringing people in to experience glamping for the first time, as well as obviously traditional glamping folks who, as you said, might have stayed at Terramor before. It also gives people a new reason to return. So I love when there's a mutual beneficial partnership like that. And I think, again, it's super smart that Terramor has chosen people that have a good brand and reputation in what they do in that area. And that should they open more locations in the future outside of the Northeast or wherever in the country, it's a model that can be able to be replicated down the road. You can find whoever that cool local thing is and tailor it to the area and the surroundings and make every different type of wellness retreat and everything really unique and really different, no matter what Terramor location you might be at. So I love the concept. I love the thought and intentionality that they put into that, and think that, yeah, it'll be really, really successful for them. And it was, not long as well. I like the idea of kind of a 3-4 day recharge. And particularly as you said, Matt, as you're making notes here, like pick times at which you're slow, right? If you're an existing operator who wants to try something like this, add a yoga type of event to a slow weekend. And instead of a kids themed weekend, make it more of an adults like wellness and relaxation type of weekend, and just break out of that traditional box a little bit.
Yeah.
We hear and we do themed weekends targeting kids a lot. This adult focused wellness and retreat type of experience, I think is that, cooler version, pairs really, really well with a glamping operation, especially.
Yeah.
So,
Well said.
any final thoughts before we wrap up the tech corner here?
Yeah, actually, a couple shout outs. One, I think we'll revert back to our newsletter that went out this week with a quick shout out. Interesting conversation that I had with Stephen Kramer at Campground Support. So let's save that for the next segue. But I took a trip to Austin, Texas last week and got to go see Billy Ryan at Horseshoe Ridge RV Resort.
Wow.
And he's such a great operator. He built this place, and it's just such a great story. He comes from a enterprise software sales background, but he's just one of those people that is so dialed in on the details and can keep so much in his brain and just keep on top of so much stuff that it just amazes me. And have had a few chances to talk with Billy and get to know him a little bit, but when I found out I was going to Austin, I had to reach out to him and go see his park because it's an amazing park. I mean, the revenue that he's generating is incredible, right? It's I won't advertise his numbers, but it's just amazing. And I think a lot of it comes down to the tech and the marketing. He's got his marketing automation and conversion tracking so dialed in that he knows, right? He sends out an email blast, he sends out a blog, it's all conversion tracked. So he knows down to the penny what his marketing efforts are generating in terms of revenue. It's just so dialed in, and I'm so amazed every time I talk to him with the boundaries that he's pushing in terms of just the analysis and the data and just keeping everything so dialed in. So I think we're going to actually try to get him on the podcast soon. So we'll hear it straight from him. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that since I spent Friday at Horseshoe Ridge RV Resort, such a high quality resort. He did a lot of the work himself building it. He self performed and subbed out some work, but sitting in the mini excavator, sitting in the skid steer himself, pouring patios and building pickleball courts. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful park, 40 minutes outside of Austin in Wimberley, Texas. Beautiful views for miles and miles. He's got a phase 2 going with some cabins and park models. It's a top of the line operation and RV resort. So shout out to Billy.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Matt, honestly, is I'll give you some time to kind of, I know you touched on, the work you've been doing with Claude Code and putting agents at work, and I'll give you some time for that. But I think to sum up kind of the macro trend across all of what we just covered today, like, you see, number one, it's a lot of smart operations and really trying to like understand the data. Like, where is demand actually coming from? What are the opportunities that you can gather to get those repeat guests? And how are you positioning your marketing, your programming, and your level of service to really deliver on that? And then I think, again, as we touched on in the opening, this event-driven business, I think, is only going to continue to grow. We've seen it already at our park. I feel the direct impact of that, right? It's an extra, call it 30 to 40 grand that we're getting during that period that we didn't have on the books before, just from an event like, a music festival. So putting that on a national scale across parks, all over the country, I think finding those type of opportunities and leaning in hard to those annual repeat type of events, whether they're put on by the community or it's some, musical artist, or it's an event like the Ember and Element Wellness Retreat that you're putting on, but those type of staples that you can get people to come back to year after year, that you have a date, this is when this happens, and I go camping during this time. I think that is only going to continue to strengthen. We know that that's been a pillar of the industry for so long with the holidays, right? 4th of July, Labor Day, those are inherently event-driven business for the national holidays. I think that model is continuing to expand in so many different avenues, and there's so many more type of large and small events for operators to take advantage of. be on the
Yeah.
lookout for that. This is a big year for big events. So if you haven't started planning for, America 250, Route 66, the World Cup, if you are a glamping operator doing a type of wellness event, like there's so many different opportunities to take advantage of. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of that. But
Yeah.
I'm off my soapbox now. I'll let you let you talk a little tech corner here as we wrap things up.
Yeah. So, this is maybe not directly tech corner, but it's call it efficiency corner. Definitely tech and tech adjacent. But had a really interesting conversation with Stephen Kramer at Campground Support, and I thought it was worth writing about in the newsletter because it's something that kind of challenged my thought process about the industry, and I think it's something that's worth taking a look at, especially for really for any park operator if you're trying to get better on your phones and more efficient with your payroll investment and just looking to get more efficient, but especially for small park operators. So I've always said that it's like really hard to own and operate a campground under $500,000 gross revenue. And there's so many campgrounds that are even under $250,000 gross revenue. And it just shrinks your budget dollar wise for payroll, right? You and I have talked about this a lot that it's incredibly hard to run a campground with like less than $100,000 budgeted for payroll, maybe even less than 120 or $150,000 total, right? You have your general manager that's eating up probably half of that number. And then you've got a whole host of maybe work campers or part-timers or maintenance. And it goes quick,
Yeah, and if you
right?
think about that number being, let's say, somewhere, and this is, there's a lot of different schools of thoughts here, but if your payroll is 20 to 25%, maybe, if that's a range, as you said, if you scale that down, if your park's only making 300 grand or you're under 500, yeah, that dollar amount gets real tough real quick, and there's not much room left to answer the phones and do the reservations and
Right.
everything else.
Right. The dollar amount is small, but then the percentage of revenue is huge. So it's tough to make work. So, really interesting model that I discussed with Steven. He calls it his remote manager model. And it's like a part time model that is really good fit for these smaller parks, say like 50 sites or less. No hard numbers there, but you know, smaller revenue parks should really take a look at this. And basically, what it allows you to do is free up the time that you'd have your camp host or manager, or whoever is the front desk employee, free them up so they don't have to just sit behind the desk. Because you know better than anyone else, running a campground is you're running across probably a 20 or 50 or 100-acre property. You're racing around in a golf cart. You're going from bathhouse to bathhouse to bathhouse to cabin to cabin to cabin. Like you are in a million different places any given day, but you also have to answer the phone. So you also have to be sitting there. So you either have to hire two people or devise a system that allows people to move around and still have good service on the phones. So what this remote manager model does is outsources your phones at least part of the time with a US based call center that is not a normal call center, right? I think there's a negative kind of aura and connotation around call centers, outsourced, overseas, no real value add. It's just somebody to answer the phone because you feel like somebody needs to answer the phone. Whereas this is all US based. They get plugged in with your camp host or your manager. So, right, maybe you close the office down, you reduce your office hours, put a QR code on the front door or a phone number or whatever, give them quick access to call in. That call center remote manager is plugged in with the person on site so they can get them to jump in when somebody's needed in person or they get the answer and they call back, right? Just a tighter, more reliable, more efficient way to staff your park and make sure your guests are getting the information that they need. So check it out, campgroundsupport.com. Look up Stephen Kramer. I think it's a really good service. You'll see him at all the conferences and all that too. So check it out.
Man, to end on an ad, I don't know that. I guess it wasn't really an ad. It's really a plug
Oh yeah,
for
no, just
a service that I think is really beneficial for a lot of people, especially if you have
yeah,
hesitancy with like an AI robot's going to answer my phone, which I think could very well be coming, but you still want some level of service, right? Like you're worried about, as you said, going to another country, doing the reservation process as well as you.
They
This
don't
is
know
kind
the
of a
park. They don't know
right.
how to get actual
This is the
answers.
solution for that. This is somebody who's going to be an extension of you and your staff. So
Right. And yeah, if you're like creeping up to 30% plus of your gross revenue as payroll, even 25% plus, that's probably keeps you up at night. And this is a way, in a relatively affordable way to fill that gap. And yeah, it's not an ad at all. It's just an interest. And like I said at the beginning, it challenges the way I think about the business, because normally I would tell anybody and everybody, do not buy a park under $500,000 gross revenue. But I do, right? That's such a small segment of the market that if there is a way to make the small campgrounds work,
that's where the
there's
deals
endless
lie
opportunity.
sometimes. So
Exactly. So
hey, I'm all about finding ways to run the parks more creatively. Saving money is always something that it speaks to everybody. So yeah, I think they definitely have a great service. I've heard from people who use them. Again, we don't use them just because we're a little bit more of that resort style model, and we're over that 500,000 range. So, but I know of a couple of people who do use them and really really like what they have to see. So
yeah,
definitely something to check out if that's a pain point of yours that you've been looking for.
yeah.
All right. With that, I think, Matt, let's leave it at that. I know that was a lot of demand talk today, a lot of, event talk, and then a little bit of reservations help. So I think we had a little bit of a light news week. I think there's a lot to talk about, and looking forward to getting everybody back here next week. In the meantime, catch up on any past podcast episodes if you missed anything, like our conversation on hotels versus campgrounds last week, along with a lot of experiential conversation with Travis Chambers and some water utility stuff there. So if you missed that episode, go grab that one once you're done with this. Subscribe to the newsletter as that continues to drop, and we'll see you back here next week for another episode.
Yeah, next week we'll try to talk about OpenClaw.
That sounds great. I know we've been teasing it in bits and pieces, and
Yeah.
The more we digest that, I think we'll come with a great piece for everybody next week.